there. We are with Kim Keller. She's the Senior Manager, Global Community Impact for Johnson & Johnson. Also a longtime member of PQMD and the former head of the Guidelines Committee and now Secretary to the Board. So thanks, Kim, for taking the time today to be with us and talk a little bit about your background and about J&J.
It's a pleasure, EJ. I look forward to the conversation and I hope you're doing well in this strange time.
It is a strange time, and that's why we've started these different interviews, which are called the People of PQMD, and it's an opportunity for people to get to know you a little bit more during this time when we're all quarantined, and we thought it would be a good chance to have short conversations with our members and also representatives of other organizations that are part of PQMD, so we can continue to learn about each other and get to know each other ever better. So I have a few questions for you, and I'm going to start with saying that, or with asking, you have had a really interesting and varied career and have had a broad range of expertise, including being an officer in the Air Force and working as an electrical engineer. Tell us a little bit about your formative years and how you decided to move into a career at J&J.
So I grew up in a military family. So my father was in the Air Force, his career in the Air Force, and we moved around a lot. And obviously he was a big influence on my going to ROTC, the Reserve Officer Training Corps program, getting a scholarship and going into the military. Didn't really think that was going to be for me, but turned out it was a pretty awesome experience. I graduated from Vanderbilt University with a degree in electrical engineering and subsequently passed my professional engineering license. 4 years at Vanderbilt was spent in ROTC, and so the day I graduated, I also received my commission as an officer. It was in the late 80s, and budgets were tight, and so I spent 6 months working at a steel mill before I actually went on active duty. So that was a really good experience, being a maintenance supervisor as a 21-year-old with a bunch of hardened steel workers really was truly an experience and test of my merit. And then about 6 months after graduating from college and getting my commission, I spent 4 years in the Air Force. I was stationed in southern New Mexico, and I was in what they call a civil engineering squadron, where I was doing base maintenance and repair, construction projects, things like that. That's my expertise. Loved that. Was not really ready to go and become a senior officer yet. And as far as being done with engineering, I was really enjoying learning about engineering. So I got out of the military after my 4-year commitment. And I went to work for some design consulting firms and actually was doing design and construction management, engineering, working with architects to do buildings, hospital centers, things like that. And was actually working in Tennessee when I got a call from J&J. And I was like, this is my friend. I have a friend who lives in New Jersey from college, and she's punking me. This is some sort of punk. So, because it was left on my answering machine, I was like, yeah, this is weird. So I called it, and lo and behold, it really was. My resume was on the Society of Women Engineers database, and so they looked me up and they found me. And I came to New Jersey, and my girlfriend was like, you're going to come and stay with us, and we're going to see you because you're never coming up here. We'll never see you up here again. Lo and behold, 25 years later, here I am in the Northeast. Have had a great career at J&J. Spent most of my time design, construction, maintenance, project management. Started up a new business within J&J. And about 7.5 years ago, almost 8 years ago now, well, first of all, let me say a story. This is a funny story. So the first day I started at J&J, I met one of my really good friends, and she recently passed away, but she and I were really good friends for a long time. She started at J&J the same day I did. She was in quality and I was in engineering. And about 2 weeks into our stay at J&J, we joined a employee trip to New Brunswick, because we were living in Princeton, which is not very far, to go to the State Theater, which is the big theater in New Brunswick, New Jersey, and to see a show. Well, it turned out it was their gala, and they were honoring J&J. And the guy, who I still don't remember who it was to this day, got up on stage and thanked the State Theater for giving J&J the award, and he outlined his career at J&J, and he was talking about all the great work that J&J did, and the State Theater was talking about all the great work, and I said, you know what, one day I want to be him. I want to be on that stage saying, thanking everybody for the great work that J&J does. So I was always very interested in this work, had been very involved in volunteering and community service in high school and college. And so 8 years later, I'm having this wonderful opportunity to do the great work that we do, to support those on the front lines of care, to address, hidden conditions, traumatic birth injuries and different things like that, that really allow me to live into the J&J credo every day.
Thank you. And yeah, J&J has definitely been a leader in so many things. And I think under the stewardship of your participation in PQMD. So it really is, I think you are on that stage. You have made it onto that stage. But how do you think your career path, as varied as it is, has made you particularly effective in your current role?
Well, when I took this job, my new boss told me that this role was a kind of a payment for great work done throughout my career at J&J. So I always thought that was pretty fun, because this is kind of a group, not as much now as it used to be because CSR has gotten a lot more formalized, but it was a group where people went, not to die, but to retire. People didn't want to leave once they got in the group. So it was a real honor to be asked. I was one of the first people to join the group after many years of being kind of the same bunch. So, and I think people always ask me, yeah, what was my transferable skill? I mean, how did you go from engineering to CSR? Well, the work that I do with product donations and disaster response is really formulaic. I mean, it's not formulaic, but it's really process oriented. And my mother always said I would organize the world. And I love to build communities and programs and projects. And so that's really, I think, I found my sweet spot, because that's what it's all about with product donations. At least at J&J it is. I work for corporate, and corporate doesn't have any products. So it's really all about partnering with the operating companies, building the relationships with the NGOs, and all the project management work and all the new business startups and everything I've done in J&J and all my other careers have really brought me to be able to bring those skills to this new role and opportunity. And I love to learn. And that's one of my fun things. I haven't really kept a job more than 3 or 4 years. I mean, even though I've been with J&J for 25 years, I've changed jobs all these times. And it's mostly because I'm kind of get to a point where I feel like I've learned as much as I can learn and really keep growing. But in this job, it's been almost 8 years, but things are always changing. I'm taking on new responsibilities and new opportunities to build the business differently. So that's why I'm still so engaged. It's so much fun.
That's really interesting. I think many people would say that addressing disasters and humanitarian crisis takes an innovative mind and a creative response, and certainly a strong systems thinking in order to mobilize all the resources that you mobilize. So I can definitely see those transferable skills. You talked a little bit about the parts or the functions of the job that you love, but if you could tell us a little bit about your passion or your favorite programs and projects and sort of what drives you to want to make a difference in the world.
So I think there's a couple of things. I mentioned that I've always liked to build community and building those relationships. And so that to me is a great part of what we do. I love spending my day with people of like minds, and all the NGO partners that we deal with come from the same place. It's all about heart. I mean, you can't do this work and just kind of do it. You have to really believe in it and believe that what you're doing is the right thing, because it's, despite the fact that people probably think a lot of times that giving away stuff is easy, it's not. And there's a lot of detail and there's a lot of regulations. And so there's a lot of things to be concerned about. But when you're coming at it with a group of people that feel the same way, it's really special. Over the years, I think the thing that I've gotten the most passion for, other than just product donations, is the work that we've done around obstetric fistula. For people who don't know, obstetric fistula is a traumatic birth injury that happens mostly in the developing world, where people don't have assisted births, don't have assisted labors. And what typically happens is a woman will struggle in labor for days, the baby is stuck, the baby will die, and the woman can be left incontinent for the rest of her life. For lack of a simple suture and a trained surgeon, it can be cured. So J&J is committed to providing enough sutures to all the people who are doing surgeries around fistula and doing training and supportive programs. And having met some women who have suffered from fistula and who've been cured and have talked to them about their journey, it's just something that I feel really deeply about. And people always think, well, it's only in the developed world, but the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City is built on the site of the last fistula hospital in the US. So it's not like it never happened here. It's just we have really good health care. And maternal deaths and obstetric fistula, which is a maternal morbidity, are really an indicator of a successful health system. And so that really helps us drive to building more consistent health systems so everybody has the right level of care, so that nobody has to suffer from something like an obstetric fistula. That's kind of a passion.
Well, as you have mentioned, J&J does a lot in the donation space, and you and J&J have certainly been a corporate leader within the community of PQMD and well beyond. What are you doing differently now, and how do you think J&J is working differently with the challenges presented by COVID-19, especially since many of the programs that you're working on are long-term humanitarian issues that J&J remains committed to?
Well, our focus within the global community impact took a bit of a finer point in the last year or two. And we're really looking at supporting and championing those on the front lines of care, specifically nurses, health workers, community health workers, and midwives. And we're looking at doing it in the areas of leadership and management development, skills and capabilities development, mental health and resilience, technology, and a couple of other areas that really are focused on building and strengthening healthcare systems on a global basis. So the programs that we've done in relationship to COVID are continuation and in some cases acceleration of programs that we've been planning already. Yet we have done some pivots. Some of the mobile technology that we're working on, we were looking at mental health and resilience just in general in support of nurses and community health workers and midwives. Well, we've done some changes in programming to make sure that we're including COVID, from that perspective. But it's always been focused on the health workers. We've done some, we've shifted some technology programs to doing contact tracing and different things like that, especially in Africa, given that that is an issue. It was always on the plate to be done, but it was farther out. And we've just pulled it in, especially, now thinking about COVID causing people not to go to the clinics and potentially increasing the other morbidities and other, long-term health conditions that may be happening because people aren't getting their immunizations or things like that. But training nurses, training community health workers to be aware of all infectious diseases and things like that. That's still the focus of our work. And we're still working in our key countries, and we're still working with a lot of the same partners because we don't like to shift partners. We like to build those relationships and really make them strong. And that's really how we think you can build sustainability. So I think the biggest change for all of us is, like a lot of people, nobody can go anywhere. So you can't visit partners. You can't see the action in the field. You just kind of have to take it for granted, which we've worked with partners for a long time, so it's not an issue, but it's just different. It's just, you feel disconnected. You feel a little bit less involved. But I think because of the work we've been doing and the partners we've been working with, they're still fully engaged. Now, the fistula surgeons, not so much, because that could be considered an elective surgery and they can't really do outreach given COVID, but in general, our programming continues.
It's really heartening to hear that, because I've discovered through many of these interviews that our organizations are actually really well placed to be addressing COVID and any pandemic that comes up by virtue of the fact that there are these longstanding relationships and experience in dealing with humanitarian crisis, whether it be an epidemic, a natural disaster, or now a pandemic. So it's very, very exciting to hear that. I have one last question, and that is, what has being part of the PQMD community meant to you personally and in your job and for J&J?
So I started this job in 2012, and I went to my first PQMD in Labor Day of 2012, and I went to my first PQMD meeting in early October of 2012. I met all these amazing people and learned so much, and went back home, and 2 weeks later, Sandy hit. And Hurricane Sandy hit. Everybody in the US knows what Sandy is. If I hadn't had the opportunity to meet everyone at PQMD, doing my job would have been that much more difficult, just because I wouldn't have had even the relationship for 5 minutes with them. And that really just, continued to show itself as we've moved forward. We've gotten closer. Some of the PQMD reps that I deal with through PQMD, but I also deal with through the regular business, because I work strictly with PQMD partners from a product donations perspective, they're family. I mean, it's family. And so for me to call up and go, I got this weird question, or my business is asking me this stupid question, but I need to ask you to talk to them because I could tell them, but they're going to get more out of it if you tell them the answer, which we all know is true. And they're like, okay, we can do that. It's just, it makes it so much easier to do the work when you trust them and they trust you. And it's not all about we give them stuff and they're nice to us because we give them stuff, because they say no. And we want them to say no. And we want them to not take stuff that they don't need. But it's so open and honest. And I've enjoyed being able to push the limit a little bit through PQMD, to leverage the PQMD partnership on the metrics and evaluations and some of the questions that we have. And we challenge each other across the board. And so the more we challenge each other, the more we learn and the more we can move the field forward, which I think is something, especially in this time of change, not just because of COVID, but business cases are changing, business needs are changing, product mixes are changing. There's a lot of need to shift and develop more maturity within product donations. And so I think PQMD is a great place to do that when we're all together and we can talk about it.
Kim, thank you so much for your time today and also for your commitment to global health and access to medicine and all of the amazing work and products and projects that you do. And so I just wanted to say thank you. And we're really excited to have J&J be part of our PQMD community and to have you be part of this effort in this program. So thank you so much and have a great day.
Thank you. You're the same.